we've had a day to breathe. I still am living in a dream with what's happened to the Arizona Cardinals since the start of the 2024 NFL Draft. What does Ari Meirov think? Let's ask him.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Your team every day. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook at the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. So you know my moniker here. If I can bring smarter people than myself on, I do it. This guy, I think we can go friend of the show. I mean, I feel like friend of the show is now the correct label for this nice young gentleman. Ari Meirov from the 3013.com joins me. Ari, how the hell are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. The draft is over. I think there are not many teams that are better than the team we're going to talk about right now. So it's been a great weekend in Arizona. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a far cry from when you and I talked last offseason for sure. And real quick, the 3013.com provides unparalleled NFL insight for fans, fantasy players, and bettors to an unmatched roster of NFL experienced contributors, including executives, head coaches, and players. Visit the 3013.com this week to find out how their unmatched roster of NFL decision makers graded your team's draft. And it's perfect timing having Ari on. Like, we went around the world with the Arizona Cardinals and the futility and instability, dysfunction, and so many things have happened since then that would lend to that even stronger. But it seems like right after the tampering story that you and others tweeted out, it's gone to like this heavenly body of what the hell just happened. When you saw the old Cardinals transition into what I've been dubbing the Arizona Cardinals 2.0 from Thursday on, what was your initial thoughts as like, wait, what is this team and what are they doing?
There was probably no better formula to take to this draft for this current roster than what the Cardinals just did. And frankly, when this draft, during the lead up, the last 2 weeks, when everyone knew the Cardinals were trying to trade out, I think everyone thought they had no takers. Like, they had nobody who was going to come up and give them the proper value for what they should be getting for a team coming up to 3. And then credit to Monty Ossenford, your new GM, and then Nick Cassero and Houston, who both worked together in New England. And there are a lot of old videos in their drafting where those two guys just sit right next to each other. So clearly these talks, they've been talking to each other and nobody knew about it. And they were able to strike a deal from 12 to 3. And probably the main thing about this trade, and this is the thing that blew me away and why I give Arizona so much credit, it's Houston had 2 first-round picks. Getting their own first-round pick in next year's draft is gigantic. I can't even explain how big that is. There is, again, I hate saying it. I mean, you guys are not expecting to be a great team next year. I think you guys have understood that already. So the potential to have two top 5 picks next year, if the way the season goes the way we're expecting, is unbelievable for a roster that needs more players. Going into this draft, Arizona, I believe, had the least amount of homegrown players in the NFL. They were missing so many players. They've been so bad in the draft. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out the stat. I mean, the amount of times that Monty traded in his first year compared to how many times Steve Keim traded in his history. I don't know if anybody has found that out yet, but doing the formula that he took in this draft to get more picks next year while still getting the players he wanted this year in this draft is incredible. Like, if Paris Johnson was off the board when they got back to number 6, then he would have looked back at it and said, okay, fine, we didn't get our guy, but we got somebody else. But still getting Paris Johnson at number 6 and showing Kyler Murray, we're going to support you. We're going to get the players you want. We're going to be with you throughout this process. Unlike the previous regime, a lot of big W's being taken by this new regime so far.
Yeah, and with and I will not, and I refuse to. I've been goaded by a couple of people to try to get me to talk, well, what if they have the first pick? Are you going to trade Kyler Murray? Stop it. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that ever, hopefully. But when you look at the potential, as you mentioned, just to strengthen that, and this is not bologna sandwiches here. Like, the Cardinals and the Texans have the furthest Super Bowl odds of winning, which would mean, by smart people's estimations, they have the best chance to have the top picks in next year's draft, which Ari Meirov of the 3013.com that could mean 6 future first-round picks for the Cardinals. Like, that could mean something that we've never seen before, one of which probably would be Marvin Harrison Jr., who's going to be sitting there at 3, and the Cardinals can just moonwalk back and take maybe the best wide receiver prospect we've seen in the last 2 or 3 seasons. So, it's my mind is just exploding here with excitement.
There are so many things to process here, right? I mean, there are so many things to process here in the Arizona standpoint. And really, the thing about this, I know Monty has been saying, yeah, we did those trades because it came to us. Really, we're not thinking about 2024. Okay, give me a break. Yes, you were. Okay. Yeah. Yes, you were. Okay. This was all about it. And here's the thing. I forget about the Kyler Murray stuff for a second. If Caleb Williams and Drake May are there, they could do the exact same thing that Chicago just did this year, accumulate more picks and more picks and more picks, and still have that other pick from Houston or your own pick from Arizona near the top of the draft eventually. I know we're jumping so far ahead, but when you look at it right now, you mentioned the betting odds for teams who are going to be good this year. Those 2 teams are on the bottom. There is potential here that Arizona came away, and we'll be looking back 2-3 years from now and say Monty's first draft and what he did there set us up not just for success right now, but long-term success in Arizona, which is something that hasn't really been there in a very, very long time.
It's wild. It's wild. At My Sports Update on Twitter, just taking everything in, and I will get one more segment with Art Marov that I'm super excited about. Like, from a national perspective, and this is something that I asked you, and I wanted you to be very candid, and you were. Last time I asked, like, how often do you think about talking about the Arizona Cardinals? Do you remember me asking you that? Like, it was just like, and it's just very, it gives a perspective, obviously from a national media member, where it's like the Chargers and the Cardinals. We ran through a list of teams where it's like, nobody really talks about it unless it's like, well, when is the wagon going to fall off? When is this 10-2 going to really turn into a pumpkin? Things like that, which we saw in 2021. But does this put the Cardinals in the national media news cycle for the next 12 months, just de facto, in some form or fashion?
In a way, yes. Like right now, going through the draft and your winners and losers, and I know our site is doing it. Like, ultimately, it is difficult to really know who are the winners and losers. We haven't seen these guys on the field. But when you look at the overall draft spectrum right now, looking at what the Cardinals were able to do, not just in this draft, but to prepare themselves for future drafts, is the reason why everyone in the national media is going to say Arizona came out as winners in this draft. So everyone in the national perspective, whenever they're going to be asked those questions, and right now we're entering this bit of a dead portion of the offseason, right, everyone will be talking about Arizona because of what they did to set themselves up to get the players they got. We only mentioned Paris Johnson, but their next few picks as well were great value picks. And then what they did for 2024 is amazing, and everyone will be talking about that. And then when you enter the season, and let's just say the Texans, and they're starting C.J. Stroud, and now they're 2-8. Everyone's gonna be mentioning that Arizona has that pick. We do that every year. I post this after every week is over during the season, the updated NFL draft order. You're gonna see Arizona up there twice every single week, after every week, week 10, week 11, week 12. And that's going to be talking about whenever people are leading up to all that draft discussion that we have in week 13, 14, 15, 16. And Arizona's going to be dominating the draft. So that's probably the way I'm looking at all of this throughout the next 12 months, that we're going to be talking about Arizona. They're going to take their lumps and everything when it comes to being on the field. But eventually, when it comes to setting up for future success, we're going to be talking about the Cardinals and how we talked about the Bears this offseason. They control the offseason. They have everything. That's the Cardinals next year.
I make noises here on Locked On Cardinals, man. Everybody knows. At My Sports Update, Ari Mayrov joining me. I want to talk more about the later rounds and value because, there are myriad outlets out there that gave the Cardinals not so great of a value draft grade this year, but gave rave reviews for 2024, obviously, and what they positioned themselves for. I want to talk to you about that a little bit. And then in the third segment, I'm going to ask you about DeAndre Hopkins and Budda Baker. And if you agree with me that they should remain Arizona Cardinals in pseudo perpetuity. We'll hit that next as Ari Mayrov joins me from the 33team.com. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place, to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, man. I mean, game 2 tonight, give me a break. Suns Suns Nuggets. How are you supposed to download what the hell happened in game one over the weekend? And then you've got Philly and Boston, two bluer bloods of the East Coast, in the Eastern Conference. What the hell is going to happen there? FanDuel's got you covered. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. I mean, Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Everydayers, this is Ari Mayroff at My Sports Update 3013.com. Official friend of the show now, which is cool. I can put you towards the top of the list. So when you look at the first two picks, I mean, the BJ Ojulari pick after Will Levis fell in the first round, everything just seemed very serendipitous for the Cardinals to be able to maximize the first three rounds of the pick, for those first three rounds of the draft. For those that missed it, Will Levis could have gone top five, was mocked by a lot of people to go top five, fell to 33. Tennessee Titans needed a quarterback for the future because the Malik Willis project didn't work. Tennessee gives up 41, so the Cardinals move back 9 spots, go up and take their quarterback. The Cardinals pick up 72 overall, which pretty much replaced the tampering swap the Cardinals had to make with Philly. Okay, we're back now. Taking BJ Ojulari out of LSU was a couple of things that Steve Keim didn't really adhere to. Big schools and positions of need in high rounds. And that's something that he punted on the last couple of years in the draft. And now you look at Paris Johnson protecting Kyler Murray, BJ Ojulari, whose brother is already with the Giants. He's already shown flashes. Like, what could it have been more of a perfect 1-2 for the Cardinals, especially with the draft capital they accumulated not only in this draft, but in next year's draft?
Yeah, I mean, I loved their first 4 picks, and we were talking about the first 2, but Ojulari, I mean, I'm from New York. I mean, if not for the injuries, Aziz Ojulari is like a really good pass rusher for the Giants, and clearly his brother has followed in his footsteps, and some people had him going near the top of round 2, some had him sneaking into round 1. You still get him despite trading back and adding more draft capital. I mean, Garrett Williams, the cornerback, he tore his ACL, I believe, in October or November, but he is somebody that entering the college season, people thought would be a first-round pick. I know it doesn't mean much, but he has the talent to be that type of a guy. I know I did a hit with a 3013 before the draft, mentioning guys who are sleepers who are going to go higher than expected. Garrett was one of them, and here he is. The Cardinals take him. They know they could take their time with him. They know he's recovering from the ACL. We don't need you on the field right away. Take your time, recover, and show what you did before the college season started, which is what everyone thought you could be. And then even their 4th pick, Michael Wilson, another guy who has had injury history, but Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, this was one of his favorite receivers in this draft, because when he is on the field, that's a big part of it. He has to be on the field, but when he is on the field, he's a really electric receiver. And again, the Cardinals know, we don't need you right now. We don't need you to be there week 1 if you're not ready, but take your time, recover, be ready, and whenever we feel like the time is to be on the field, we'll put you on the field and have you play there next season. And really the ultimate goal is to be ready for 2024 and beyond. So they did these picks not just for now, but for the future. And that's really what I see with those first 4 picks in particular.
Yeah, it's interesting because, nagging injuries no longer are correlated with ACL tears. Like ACL tears, like you become bionic. You don't have to go to Germany anymore. You don't have to be Kobe Bryant or whoever else went. I mean, did AP go to Germany? I mean, like when it comes to ACLs, it's like, okay, recoverable. Everything else, nagging injuries, like the Cardinals drafted Rondo Moore 2 years ago. He didn't play a full season or near it after his rookie year, or freshman year, where he just shattered freshman records. Like when you look at injuries and you look at it directly correlated to, draft stock and where they actually fall, when you look at those 2 picks in the 3rd round, do you see massive value there and upside? Or is this one like that's probably where it should have gone, even though you saw them as sleepers?
No, I see the upside there. And that's really what I think Monty Ossenfort saw as well. I mean, listen, I think if this was, let's say, the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think they're making these picks. The Arizona Cardinals could make these picks. They know what they're looking for, and they realize where they are as a roster right now. That's the thing you really have to commend Monty for. I mean, he realized, and also give a shout out to David Sears, who was basically the assistant GM there. I mean, he's somebody who came over from Detroit, and Detroit has had some great drafts until I don't know what the heck happened this year. Doesn't make a difference. But David Sears is another guy in that front office who is helping out Monty, and they realize where they are as a roster, and that's why they made these picks, and they made really smart picks. And I think the general public or the national perspective out of all this is going to say, I understand what the Cardinals are trying to do. I understand these picks, and it just makes sense. And again, like I mentioned before, there's the injury part of it, but let them recover, let them be with our medical staff, let them figure it out, and eventually they'll hit the field. And we probably got them with value picks compared to where a different team who's in a win now mode would have probably not taken them at this point in time in the draft.
Yeah, and the interesting part also is that, with the Cardinals, projecting for the future, one thing that has happened with the Cardinals rookies over the last handful of seasons is they've been expected to perform a lot faster. Like when you look at Marco Wilson was a key example 2 years ago. They moved up from the 6th round to the 4th to get him, gave a future 5th. It's like, okay, you're going to be CB2 now. That's it. That's what it's going to be. And hopefully Byron Murphy is going to be cornerback 1. The jury's still obviously he didn't get a whole lot of cheese this offseason with Minnesota like some had expected him to. But now it's just like what happened with Cam Thomas and Myjai Sanders, 2 third-round picks last year. The pass rush room was full, even though it wasn't great. So they got their time later in the year. This year, and this was one of the proponents for me as it pertained to not drafting Will Anderson, you're going to waste a year of a 3rd overall pick who's going to garner so much money. Seems to me, whether it be luck or otherwise, there's so much luck involved in the draft, obviously. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face, but it seemed like it was just so serendipitous the way you mentioned everything just kind of doing the right things, good things happening, and the Cardinals being able to kind of give a sneaky red shirt year for both of these guys, if necessary in some capacity, in an effort to pop later. And it's I appreciate the candor, and I appreciate you being so candid the first time, because this is a huge transition, a huge swing into people are just fawning over what the Cardinals did, which is a rare space for me to be in. Now, when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins and Budda Baker, you smiled when I brought them up. I don't know what that means. Okay, we didn't talk about this beforehand. I wanted to throw you a curveball in the final segment because it's boring to talk about what everybody else talks about. I'm in the huge camp that DeAndre Hopkins and Budda Baker should retire Arizona Cardinals. What does Ari Meirov of the 33rdteam.com think? I'll ask him next. Locked on Cardinals. So we've talked draft. We're going to talk draft until I don't want to talk draft anymore. It's I refer to Uncle Ricoing it a lot with the Napoleon Dynamite reference. I'm going to Uncle Rico that draft until week 1. I think it's very important to understand how far the Cardinals have come as it pertains to building foundation, not using crazy glue and Band-Aids, but really pouring new cement, new bedrock for this organization that was needed after the 2018 season, even though it was prolonged for 4 years. Ari Meirov, 33rdteam.com, at MySportsUpdate on Twitter. DeAndre Hopkins, Budda Baker are both going to garner big money somewhere, sometime, even though it's going to be a little bit different with DeAndre Hopkins. Am I crazy to think that the Cardinals need to figure out how to front load these deals, make them happy for 2023, and placate them during a crappy year in an effort to have them for when the Cardinals are able to jump back into relevancy?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know if I split them up. I don't think Hopkins really wants to stay in the rebuild, and that's part of the problem. The issue that's really been going on over here is that there is nobody who is willing to take on the contract. When Hopkins put out, I'm not looking for a raise, no one's really asking you to take a raise. No one wants to take the current contract you have. So that's been part of the issue of all of this. So what the Cardinals came up with this offseason was we're going to try to get a 2 or a 3 for him probably, and no team is willing to give up a 2 or a 3 and take on the contract. They want the Cardinals to eat some of it.
Pause. Is that crazy, first of all? Is it crazy that people aren't giving up? He has no guaranteed money. You're going to have to pay him something, but it's DeAndre Hopkins. Am I crazy to think that a second round should be the baseline?
You're not. It's not. It's more of just the age, and then obviously there was suspension last year, and he still was productive when he came back, but teams look at a receiver once you get up to 30, 31, 32 a little bit differently, and they don't think he's worth a 2 or a 3. It's just the way it is. So that's kind of where the problem is, and especially when you're taking on the contract as well. So there are levels to all of this, and that's been the issue. I think they've been more than open to move DeAndre, but literally no team has stepped up. I know there's been some rumors about the Chiefs and the Bills. I'll tell you right now, the Chiefs and Bills are not taking on that contract the way it is. So there's going to have to be an adjustment. Now, I just don't think, the way your take is, I just don't think DeAndre wants to be back. I think really going back after the season ended, I think everyone was looking for a fresh start. He was looking for one. They were looking for one. They knew where they are. He knows where he is, and it's just time to move on. So I think just for him alone, I just don't think he wants to be back. And that's part of the issue. I don't think the Cardinals, at least up top, talking from Michael Bidwell, I think they're ready to move on as well. So just the end of the year, something just felt off. I don't know what it is, but just something felt off when it comes to those parties. So I think that's where it comes to Hopkins. Buddha is a different story. Buddha is looking for a new deal, and obviously safety. The market, it is what it is. It's not really a position that when you are a rebuilding team, you want to pour that much resources into it, especially when it comes to money, and that's where the issue is. I just don't know as a team if you want to create the precedent that we're just going to move any frustrated player. And that's really where it becomes really complicated for Monty. And that's where I really want to see what he does here, because this is a guy who is amazing on the field, but even better off the field and in the locker room. And you really need that guy, especially when you're going into this phase of your team right now, where it's going to be a bit of a rebuild. So you would love to keep that guy. He's still young. But are you willing to give him a new deal when they just did one, I believe, 2 years ago, and he's going to be looking to get to $20 million a year, probably become the highest paid safety. Right now, it's Derwin James. They both share an agent. So I'm sure they're going to be looking to top each other. So that's where it becomes a little bit complicated. I just don't think it's worth it to show, all right, this guy's upset, we're trading it. This guy's upset, we're trading it. You don't want to create that precedent as a new GM, and that's where it becomes complicated. I think there are two different situations. One's an older player. One's a younger player. You want to show if the younger player, you're willing to keep him and reward him and pay him. And that's where I think it's going to be a really, really fascinating thing for Monty to see what he does. Because as we mentioned before, when you're a rebuilding team, you're not looking to pay a safety. That's what the Jets did with Jamal Adams and traded him away. They weren't ready to pay a safety when they were still going to be 5-11. So that's going to be part of the equation that he's going to have to figure out over here.
Yeah, that's a really good synopsis of that, because you also don't want to set the precedent where anybody that says I want a new contract, they get it right away either. You know, exactly. So it's a double-edged sword with that. Now with Hopkins, I just know that he's going to perform elsewhere. He's never relied on his speed. That's my anchor. Like, that's my opening thesis for why to keep DeAndre Hopkins. He can play till he's 36 if he's healthy. He's never been fast. He just catches everything. And he's 6 feet. He plays like he's 6'4" in the red zone. And I still think he's one of the best receivers in the league. I can be okay with what you just said about that, but I 100% agree that, like, I say this, and I say this very gingerly because I'm not comparing these two players whatsoever, but Budda Baker is the closest thing to Larry Fitzgerald that the Cardinals have had since Larry Fitzgerald. And I think it's so important to build Arizona Cardinals and not just be a transplant team like the city of Phoenix is. Like, that's just what the Cardinals are, a transplant team. It's hard to build a culture when you bring players over from different organizations and you're not drafting them. So with Budda Baker, all he's done is be a missile on the field through bad years, through good years, with a smile on his face, in the locker room, outside the locker room. They focused him on Hard Knocks in season. Like, he is the Arizona Cardinals. And when it comes to this, and you look at Kyler Murray already only being the 7th or 6th highest paid quarterback in the NFL for 15 minutes after he got the contract, you giving him a 2 or 3 year contract extension in Budda Baker is going to look like a steal in 2 years. Like, I don't understand the vitriol behind not giving him money. Like, and you said it yourself. You're like, he's good on the field. He's even better. He is the locker room. And that's why it's like, this should have been, and you want to push back, you want to have him request a trade before he gets what he wants. Sure. I get the gamesmanship with that. But the draft is over. You have your clear vision for the future. And Budda Baker damn well better be a part of it. This isn't even me, like, being a fan of the team or anything like that, because I'm very honest about the team here on this podcast. But Ari, would it be, even if they could say they got 2 2s for Budda Baker, would it be worth trading him?
I just recall I don't remember who it was, maybe it was both of them, Gannon and Monty, in their opening press conference just mentioned, we want our players to be like Budda Baker.
Yeah!
That's what they said, right? It would be pretty awkward if you trade him away 5 months later. So that's the way I look at it. But it's a hard dynamic because it's legit money. Like, you're really giving up like $20 million per year for a position that teams just don't do in a rebuild. But again, he does more than just to play. And I think that's the thing they're going to have to figure out over here. And if I was to bet, I would probably guess that he ends up staying. When it comes to DeAndre, by the way, let me just go back to him for a second. I've wondered a lot throughout this offseason if it gets to a point where the Cardinals are willing to eat most, if not all, of the contract just to take back a second-round pick, because you're anyways accumulating picks. You might as well just do it. Yeah. He doesn't want to be there. Take the second-round pick, add another one to your your treasure chest of picks right now and just go ahead with that. So I'm curious to see if that ends up happening as well. But when it comes to Buddha, I'm right there with you. This guy is the heart and soul of the team. I mean, you should try to do whatever it takes to probably keep him because he is that important.
Great stuff as always. Again, the 3013.com provides unparalleled NFL insight for fans, fantasy players, and bettors through an unmatched roster of NFL experienced contributors, including executives, head coaches, and players. Visit the 3013.com this week to find out how their unmatched roster of NFL decision makers graded your team's draft, one of whom, Ari Mayroff at My Sports Update. Friend of the show, stamp it. Ari, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you tomorrow.